So I'm Sarah, and can you tell me who you are?
I'm Harrison.
I'm Rebecca.
I'm Sienna.
I'm Alec.
And you guys have you read anything about the Globe Theater, or is this your first stop today?
This is our first stop.
Okay. Do you see what's behind?
Well, actually, we just went to a stop. It was like a Shakespearean rap battle between the Montagues and the Capulets.
Cool. Was that filmed here? Can you see our stage?
Yeah, at the
American Shakespeare.
Yeah, American Shakespeare.
Yeah. So that was cool.
Yeah, and we prepared some questions for you.
Great. Well, ask away.
Okay, so like what we saw like in the video, it was like a rap battle, so it was clearly changed from the Shakespeare. So what kind of like modifications do you guys have to make to Shakespeare's plays to keep like selling tickets?
We actually have a policy that we don't change the plays. So what we do is we try to make it 2 hours traffic of the stage, like it says in Romeo and Juliet. The first prologue says 2 hours traffic of the stage. So that means that sometimes we have to cut lines, but cutting lines isn't anything that Shakespeare's company didn't do. So we figure that you can say about 20 lines every minute. So that means we cut our plays to like 2,200 to 2,400 lines, so we still have time to do the fights and the dances and stuff like that. But our policies say you can only change 20 words within a given Shakespeare play. So like sometimes we might change a word that's kind of old-fashioned to something that you guys would understand more quickly, but that's kind of all that we do. What really matters is that you have to have actors who know what they're saying and know why they're saying it, and then it's really clear for the audience. You don't have to change it if there's a good reason to say it. The audience gets it.
Okay. That's gotcha.
Why was modernizing Shakespeare so important to you guys as a company?
So that rap battle, which is really cool because we have 2 guys in that particular troupe who know how to rap and who are rappers, is an example of how we introduce music before the shows and during the intermission. And we use music that you guys know. Like, who's your favorite musician right now?
Lil Mosey. I'm just kidding.
Who?
No, that was just a joke. It's just this like he's kind of
Just say your favorite rapper.
I don't really have.
We do lady. We do a lot of modern music when we're making our shows. So you might hear stuff that you actually know from the radio or from wherever you're listening to music when you come to see a show here. So I'm going to take you to the, I'm going to go backstage and show you like where the actors have written out the music that they're going to play. But that's the only modernization that we do. We still, well, one of our shows right now has the actors wearing clothes that are like from the 90s. So it looks kind of modern that way, but it still works with the show because the play is called One Henry IV, and it's about this guy who likes to hang out in a bar and get in trouble and stuff like that. So it kind of still works for the show. So you see right here, this is what the guys are playing when they're doing the pre-show. So they've got Jimi Hendrix, Marvin Gaye, Bruno, Stevie Wonder, Whitney Houston. So that's all stuff that you could totally still hear on the radio. And these are the other ones where we're using music that's modern. So
yeah,
that's kind of our biggest concern to update is with modern music. Any other questions?
How big is the theater?
Oh, good question. So the original Blackfriars Playhouse would have seated about 600 people, and that's because it had 3 tiers of seating. Our playhouse seats, you can see it from here. That's like, you can see there are stools on stage through the chandelier. Stools down there. Our playhouse seats like 300 people, but that's because we don't have that 3rd level open. And during student matinees, when students are here, we'll take the seat backs down because those seat backs move, and we'll seat 400 people because you guys are little and we can cram you in.
How did Shakespeare change the English language?
Oh, well, there's a lot of talk about him inventing words, but he didn't actually invent words. He was just the first guy to write them down. So the first person to record them gets credited with the invention of them. But he did use words in really interesting ways. So like his rhetoric is still something that people pick up on and love to cite. There are a lot of things that we still say that Shakespeare wrote. And he was just really facile with putting words together in an order so that they create a character. So every time you read a different Shakespeare character, you hear a different voice, and that's something that he's really identified with. All of our actors play more than one part in a play, and they also will play more than one part in a season. So we have 3 plays open right now, and they're in all of those plays. One of our actors has been in every Shakespeare title and has played different roles in every one. And I think he's played every king. And he tells us that every king has a different way of speaking. And you can tell a difference between one king and another king because Shakespeare was so good at how he made character voices work.
I have another question. So like, how did Shakespeare come up with these plays? Because I know like he had like some help for like a few plays as some other person, but.
So that's a good question too. We think that Shakespeare did not come up with any of these stories on his own. The stories that he used were stories that were written and available in books. So we didn't have copyright in the same way that things are copywritten today. So like you could get prosecuted if you use somebody's words. That's not how it worked in the early modern period. But you're right that Shakespeare had collaborators. And the first collaborators that he had were his own actors. So he knew that he was writing parts for a guy named James Burbage. And James Burbage was his lead actor. So he knew that James Burbage could totally do a Hamlet, a Romeo, a King Lear, a Macbeth, all of those parts. And he also collaborated with other playwrights. So there's a play called Henry VIII, and he probably collaborated with that one with John Fletcher, who's the guy who became the playwright for his company when Shakespeare retired. He also probably coordinated like on Titus Andronicus, which is a real bloody play. There's definitely some indication that he coordinated with another playwright. On Pericles, he definitely did. On Two Noble Kinsmen, he definitely did. So we see all these plays where the guys were working together, and that wasn't at all unusual in the period. Many of the plays that were written in the period were written by 2 or 3 or 4 people working together. Any other questions?
Why was Shakespeare so influential?
Why was Shakespeare so influential? That's a great question.
Last question.
Last question. Okay. So Shakespeare was so influential because, well, actually in his own time, he may not have even been the most popular playwright. But as history progressed, we began to admire the way that he wrote, and we made him assigned in all of our classes. And I think that the reason for that is because he was so good with language, and he drew these characters that we can all relate to, and we can all see a little bit of ourselves in them. So thanks for your questions. I hope you have fun with the rest of your...
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
We're going to have a break, and then we'll be back. Thank you very much. So like 5-10 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Well, I'm thinking like the bigger ones that are like go cross country or international. That's what I said. It's like 242. Yeah. Sometimes people like pretty good. Yeah. And can you do like I was in the real CP movie. Like that was like you know like right next to you. Breathe. There was that girl next to you. But it was just you and your mom, right? And she was behind me in this video. Like when I recognized it, my mom was like, "We have any like what she took like always had that in the bag. Yeah. Like, yeah, like, one of the I think you can produce both. Well, it's flying into Denver, Colorado, because of all the mountains. Yeah. There's always, the winds are always very, like, crazy, so flying in and out of Denver. Yeah. I'm like, wet wind, like, I was sitting there, like, the game used to me was like, freaked out, people was like, this, like, you know, older, it was that nice, things we have to be I'm gonna say strangers. I need to be on the better end. I like that. Yeah, I can't do it. Yeah, it's you. Interesting eyes. Either. I think it's a try. I don't. I really listen to whatever, watch whatever, I play games. It's that like the only time I play Candy Crush and like these stupid games on my phone, like I play solitaire and play such old persons. was snowing. And like it snowed on Monday. And then it changed to rain, so it was like snow and it was warm during the days, but then ice got cold, so it melted, and then it was ice, and then it was like I couldn't even take. Like it was nice during the day, most of the days it was sunny, but I couldn't even take Canada to the dog park. All everything was like well, so I'm gonna give you guys, let's do this for adjective, like possessive. Alright, so that you can, okay. This is pretty easy. That's correct. And then I'm gonna give you one during the week on, yeah, it's not, well, for you guys, it's not. It's so one usually has to do this. Because most of the vocabulary you guys do is be it's all matched. So don't worry about doing this now. I'm gonna give you guys I'm gonna give you another one during the week grammar. I'm gonna give you one on like interrogative pronouns, which use
Hi, Sarah. One more minute. Thank you very much. Oh, scratch that. 5 seconds. Here are your students.
Hello.
Sit down.
Hi.
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 Opine un tout petit peu. Voilà.
Hi. I'm Sarah. Who are you?
Hi. I'm Emilio.
Hi, Amelia.
I'm ECR. I'm Tim.
And who are you over on the?
I'm Elise.
Oh.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Tim.
Hi, Tib. Nice to meet you guys.
Nice to meet you too.
So, what do you know? What questions do you have?
You go ahead. No, you go ahead. No, you start.
Okay, I'll ask the question.
Go this way.
Why do you like Shakespeare?
I like Shakespeare because I think he wrote beautiful characters who are fun to play and fun to look at. I think he told stories that we can still relate to. And there's a lot of really interesting ways that he uses words that are still fun to look at. Also, he was working in a time which we kind of embrace at the American Shakespeare Center when actors didn't have a director, so they did everything collaboratively, which I think is a really good thing. I think it's way better to work together than to have to work by yourself. And then he worked in a time when paper was scarce, so instead of having the full text, the actors just got their part and they had to put it together like a puzzle. And I think that's kind of a fun way to look at Shakespeare. And this particular playhouse, we have the lights on the audience all the time. And And that means that the actors can talk to you, and that makes Shakespeare a lot more fun and really interesting and fun to look at.
Why did you decide on a position in which you would uniquely focus on one playwright and his plays?
So we actually focus on Shakespeare, yeah, but we also focus on the other people who were writing in Shakespeare's period. So there are lots of guys, Ben Jonson, Middleton, Fletcher, Beaumont, Kidd, lots of other playwrights. And we do those plays here too. And it's really interesting to see Shakespeare's plays next to those guys. We also do anonymous plays because, like, right now our actors are in rehearsal for a play called Arden of Faversham. And that one's kind of like a true crime drama. This woman is having an affair, and she and the guy that she's having an affair with decide that they're going to kill her husband. And so they have to suss that all out. But so we actually look at the whole early modern period, but we also look at plays that will just work well here with the lights on, with the audience on the stage, all of that stuff. Because like a play like Oscar Wilde's Importance of Being Earnest works really well here. We've done some Jane Austen, Sense and Sensibility, which of course is a book, but it was adapted for the stage by a playwright named M. Lipday. And we have new plays that we've just started this contest. Do any of you guys like to write? You could win $25,000 if you submit a play to our contest.
I'll write it now.
So you might want to start thinking about writing. So we also are doing new plays, but the main thing that we ask those playwrights to do is to think about how to tell the story that they're going to tell in the same way that Shakespeare would have, with 12 to 15 actors, lights on theater, not a lot of set changes, all of that stuff. And that's, we have one on stage right now called Anne Page Hates Fun. The playwright Amy Wittig submitted it last year, and then we started working with it and working with her, and now it's on stage. So that's, it's not just Shakespeare, but it is a lot about how Shakespeare's plays worked. And I think that's fun to explore.
How much time does it take to memorize a text?
Depends on how big your part is. So our actors will get their parts, like say in October for a January play, but they're doing other plays when they get those parts. So they're not focusing all of their effort on it. We think that in Shakespeare's lifetime, there may have been evidence that a play was delivered to a playhouse and the players in it on one day, and then there was another day that they didn't perform that play, but they performed a different play. And then on the third day, they performed the new play. So that means like they had like 48 hours to memorize their parts. So that it makes, I think that actors have brains that take it in a little bit more quickly, and all of our actors memorize their parts in different ways. Some of them write them out onto cue cards and like flip through them like flashcards. Some actors record it and then just listen to it over and over and over again. So everybody does it a little bit differently, but it depends on the size of the part as to how big it is. And you guys can read more about how actors in Shakespeare's day worked by looking at Tiffany Stern's Rehearsal from Shakespeare to Sheridan, or Tiffany Stern's Making Shakespeare. And that gives you some insights as to how much time they had to memorize and what they did in rehearsal and stuff like that.
Do you choose your roles, or are you assigned one?
So I'm the director of education, so I don't get to play on stage anymore. The last time I played a part was Faustus, Dr. Faustus by Christopher Marlowe, and I was Lucifer in that, so I played Satan, which was pretty awesome. And I got to come through the trapdoor. I don't know if you can see the trapdoor. No, you can't from here. But I didn't choose that part. I was cast in that part. And do you see the trap? Can you make out the trap in the middle of the floor down there?
Yeah.
But our actors are actually, they are given their roles by our artistic team. So our casting director and our artistic director will cast this season. And sometimes, like when they're in rehearsal, like this season, they are doing what's called the Actors Renaissance season. And this is the season when they work without a director. So sometimes in the midst of rehearsal, they'll realize that, for instance, they need a different person to play a servant than who was cast in it because that person won't have time to get their costume changed between. So they'll move parts around a little bit, but not a whole lot because we've already printed our programs and stuff. So there's not a whole lot of room for changing things.
How many plays do you guys have in a year?
Oh, that's a good question. So Shakespeare's Company would probably have done upwards of 40, 43 plays in a year. There's a book called Henslow's Diary that tracks not Shakespeare's Company, but the company like right across the street from him and shows us that they were doing like over 40 plays a year. Our company does 17 plays a year. So we do, we're doing 4 this season with a staged reading. And then we're doing 4 next season, which is May to June. And then we do 2 or 3 in the holiday season. And we do 4 or 5 in the fall, summer and fall. So we end up doing about 17 plays a year here.
So my question is like, what's your job like specifically in the American Shakespeare Center?
So I run programs for high school students. We have a residential camp that stays at our partner university, Mary Baldwin. The kids go 3 weeks without seeing their parents and then perform on the stage at the end of the camp. They take classes, you can get college credit, that kind of thing. So that's our college prep program. We also have a program called Lifelong Learning. In that program, we've got lecture series and a Shakespeare in Leadership for business people and Shakespeare's birthday party, stuff like that. So that's for general audiences. Then we have a program for teachers, which is teacher seminars, and also teacher study guides. So I sent your teacher a study guide from our collection to use when you guys start your unit. And then we also have a program that we call Research and Scholars. They come here and do conferences or bring their students so their students can see plays and they can take classes here. So we have 4 different places that we kind of work with audiences to enjoy the play a little bit more.
Do you feel that like the English Shakespeare theater companies have a superior view of themselves compared to you guys?
That's a good question. I have lots of friends who work in England and in Shakespeare companies. And I think maybe everyone has, even American and English companies have a little bit of like, well, we do this better than they do. But I don't think that I think that it's more collaborative and that we all want to learn from one another. There's this organization called the Shakespeare Theater Association. And that group of people gets together every year and they just share information with one another. So, so there's this real interest in learning from each other and in doing work that's good because you want more people to end up liking Shakespeare. So that they'll want to come see the shows and buy the tickets and pay my salary, all that stuff.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Everyone, bye-bye.
The question is, it's your brain started it, all done. What would you do without you?
Hey, Sarah.
Hi.
We are gonna bring a bigger group in here so to maximize your time.
Okay.
So let me just move you around. Sorry.
It's all right.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
If anything, I'm learning a lot. So these are our next group of students.
Hello.
Introduce themselves. You're in the back, and you're in the back.
I'm in the back.
No, you're in the front. You are in the. We have 3 more students.
Should I like bend down?
Okay.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Theo.
I'm Shoshana. I'm Andrea. I'm Emmanuel.
And I'm Leo.
Hi guys. How are you?
Good.
How are you?
Good. How's this whole thing going? Are you having fun?
Yeah.
It's fun. Yeah.
What have you learned so far?
There's
Bunch
a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
How,
it's
like,
so interesting.
how Romeo's kind of a necrophiliac.
No, no, Theo, no.
A little bit.
God. That's not the best way to start. But yeah, we've been
Let's start
learning
with the
facts
questions.
about the play, and we just watched a rap done
The
by.
cool rap.
Yeah, we
so
were amazing. It's awesome.
Those guys are so awesome. They are still working for us. One of them, KP, Kyle Powell, who wrote the rap, is on stage in 1 Henry 4 right now. And then the other guy who wrote the rap, Josh Clark, who played Romeo for us, is on the road. So he's in Antigone, in Comedy of Errors, and in The Winter's Tale right now. So do you guys have any questions for me?
Yeah, sure. Who would like to start?
I have one. So for the rap, for example, how long does it take you to write all the lyrics? And do you write them yourselves or do you find them somewhere?
Yeah, those guys wrote those lyrics, and I honestly don't know how long it took them, but our rehearsal process for those guys was about a month. So they probably wrote it at some point in that rehearsal process and then gave everyone their parts and assigned them to do it. And then we filmed it, and they played it on the road. Every time that they did Romeo and Juliet, they would do that before the play. And we have like a whole lot of music that we do all the time. And so that's just one piece. We have like the tour does about 30 minutes worth of music before every show and then during the interlude. So I'm taking you backstage right now so you can see the musicians list that they play from, and you can see the kinds of songs that our actors do. So like, tell me, who are some of your favorite musicians?
Ariana Grande.
Ariana, we've done Ariana Grande. We do all modern stuff as part of our, it's like how we get people excited about the play and feeling like the play is about modern stuff as well as old-fashioned stuff. So can you see the music list here?
Could you read them out to us?
Yep. Red House by Jimi Hendrix, Sexual High by Marvin Gaye and Radiohead, Bad Mama Jama by Carl Carlton, Finesse by Bruno Mars, Sir Duke by Stevie Wonder, Love Stinks and the Power of Love, Huey Lewis, I Want to Dance with Somebody by Whitney Houston. And then we've got the other plays that we do too. So you can see, like, we've got some Lamar, we've got some Flogging Molly, the Oh Hellos. So lots of different music that we do that's all modern, so that when you get to the Playhouse, it kind of feels like a party and you're like dancing in your seat and stuff like that.
It's not like mosh pit party though, is it?
Hopefully not. How do you guys like project like the music? Do you guys have like music during the plays, like in the background, like while the actors are on stage or something?
So that would be something that we might do at a scary moment to heighten the fear, but we don't so much do that much when we're just doing a regular play.
So I know that for myself, I used to think Shakespeare was boring and old. Did what propelled you to join this company and make Shakespeare your life, and then teach other people that it's not that?
Yeah. So when I was like in 9th grade, we read Romeo and Juliet aloud in class, and that is the most boring way you can possibly look at Shakespeare, because what really makes Shakespeare great is when great actors bring his words to life. And that's what he always thought that his plays would be, was just performed by actors for audiences who liked them. So it was really when I started to see the plays live done by really good people that I started to really think more about how it's a great experience to see a play live, especially in a playhouse like this, where we, leave the lights on the audience. And so you become part of the action. The actors in Romeo and Juliet will hand you a sword because, hey, they need to use their hands for something else right then. So it becomes really interactive, which was how we think that Shakespeare meant for it to be, because of course he couldn't turn the lights off in his playhouse. So he wrote the people in the audience into the plays. And I think that that makes all the difference. It's really important that we think about how the audience comes into play as well as the actors on stage. There's our drum kit.
That's cool.
How long? So you said that rehearsing one play takes a month, but do you guys meet like once a week, or is it like every day, a couple of hours, or?
So the actors who work here are all professional actors, which means that they are paid enough to live on to do the work. So they actually are scheduled to work 48 hours a week. And that's typical in the industry. Most contracts are 48-hour-a-week contracts. So they will rehearse 8 hours a day, 6 days of the week when they're getting a play together. And right now, we're doing our Actors Renaissance season, which is when we use the same rehearsal conditions that Shakespeare would have used. And that means that they have much less time to put a play together, because there's some evidence that a playhouse received a play from a playwright that was brand new, and then mounted the play 2 days later. And in the interim, they were doing 2 other titles because that's how the English liked to see their plays. They liked to see a different play every day. So the same actors did up to 40 or over 40 plays in a year. So they were doing a different one every day, and they only had 2 or 3 days to put a brand new play on its feet. So in our Actors Renaissance season, our actors only get 3 to 5 days to get a play ready before they perform it for the first audience. So that's a really short rehearsal process, but it means that they get really creative and they solve problems really quickly, and it's really fun to see. Sometimes in this season, they will actually not be totally off book because it's such a quick process. So we have a prompter who sits on the side of the stage, and if they need a line, they say, "Prithee," and the prompter gives them the line. And that makes for some really funny moments because there's a play that we did a few years ago called Volpone, and the character Volpone puts on a disguise, and right at the end of the play, he takes off his disguise and he says, "I am Volpone." But the actor forgot the line. So he took off his disguise and then said, "Prithee," because he couldn't remember what he was supposed to say. And the prompter said, "I am Volpone." And he said, "I am Volpone, and I will be again tomorrow night." So he was like totally embarrassed, but it was a really funny moment because that was such an obvious line that he forgot. So it's a fun season because it's really on the edge of your seat. You're wondering if they're going to make it through the play sometimes, but they always do.
How do you guys figure out who gets the leads on during the plays? Who gets the leads and who gets what parts? Is it
right. Well, when Shakespeare was writing, he was writing for specific people. So he always knew that James Burbage was going to play all the lead parts, which made things nice and easy. Our actors don't always get all of the lead roles in a season, and that's partly because they don't want to. Because if they have all the lead roles, then they have a lot more lines they have to memorize. So they will get distributed stuff. Like Brandon, he's playing the lead role in Henry IV, but he's got smaller roles in Merry Wives of Windsor and in Anne Page Hates Fun. He is playing, let's see, John has a lead role in Henry IV, and he also has a lead role in Merry Wives. So that's, one where he gets to have 2 big parts in the season. But a lot of times the actors will want to not have so many big parts so that they don't have to memorize quite so much. And the way that's determined is that our artistic staff does the casting. So they tell them what roles they're going to have.
All right, that was our last question for this group. We're going to have a quick turnaround for the next group, if that's still okay.
Yep, that's fine.
Thank
you. Bye, guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And our next group is here.
Hello. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Here.
Tell me who you are.
Here.
We're 4.
Joshua, come here. No, who you are.
Oh, Gabriel.
Gabriel, go ahead.
Go ahead. What's your name?
What's your
My
name?
name is Gabriel.
Hi, Gabriel.
I'm Sabrina. I'm Emily.
I'm Josh.
Hi. Hey, guys, show me the portrait of Shakespeare that you have on your packets. Okay. So there are a lot of portraits of Shakespeare. I'm going to send your teacher a link so she can show you some of the other ones. Because that guy, he looks kind of old and boring, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit.
Very old and boring.
That's how you really feel, Gabriel.
Why don't you ask questions?
All right, I'll ask it. This is one that I think Mrs. News wanted me to ask. Do the actors use British accents?
Nope, they don't. Do you know that Shakespeare's language, the language that Shakespeare was speaking was probably closer to American, particularly Appalachian American, than it is to what is now called received pronunciation in the UK. So we sound more like Shakespeare's actors than the people over in England where he lived.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask a question? How was that figured out?
You can look up Ben Crystal and his son, David Crystal and his son Ben, and they've been looking at the kinds of rhymes that appear in Shakespeare and in early modern plays. And so that tells them what words sounded alike. And so based on that, they've been able to devise, David is a linguistic professor. And so he's been able to come up with what the language sounded like. They spoke more quickly, and the words had sort of shorter sounds, not so many diphthongs or what have you. So, so they did a lot of research and figured out how the words sounded. And then they did some plays in what is called original pronunciation. They did them at the Globe in London. They did a Romeo and Juliet. And then there was one in Kansas at the University of Kansas as well. And they do a lot of work with original pronunciation all over the place.
Really cool.
So right there, David Crystal, you said?
Yeah, David Crystal.
That's pretty cool. Okay.
Well, so in class, we were looking at the different signatures that William Shakespeare used. I was wondering which one was your favorite that you've like seen.
I guess that the one that I've seen the most often is the one that's just a WM and then Shakespeare. So here's something that's really interesting. Shakespeare's signature is different every time he writes it, but the E in the middle of Shakespeare is there because the letters would, because of printing, when you printed a letter, I'm sorry, let me back up. You know how letters are used in printing presses? They're just these tiny little things that get put down and then the ink gets pressed on them and the paper gets pressed on that. So because K has a hang down thing, they put an E in so that the K wouldn't break off. So it's kind of like a spacer. So Shakespeare is actually Shakespeare in some of his signatures, and we only get the E because of the way that the printing press worked. And when they started to print his name, they needed that spacer between.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if the absence of a set in Shakespeare plays made it more difficult to perform them.
I think it makes it easier. It certainly makes them faster. Because when you think about like in As You Like It, Rosalind comes out on stage and she looks around and she goes, so this is the Forest of Arden. And suddenly we're all in the Forest of Arden. We don't have to like bring trees in or do anything like that. So the words tell you, and then your imagination, which is way better than anything that any set designer can do, paints the picture. So you begin to put the picture on stage without needing any set pieces.
So that's really like another aspect that Shakespeare really excelled at, where he would really put the audience in the play with them. So not having a set is like really.
That's right. The audience is part of the play. So we do it with the lights on because the lights have to stay on, and the audience, you can see the stools on stage. The audience is right there. The actors talk directly to the audience. We did there's some neuroscience to show that if you make eye contact with a person for about the length of time that a lot of Shakespeare's lines are, then your mind registers a significant relationship. And it's shown like in MRIs. You make eye contact for this long, your brain says, oh, we're having a relationship. And that kind of like goes out to everyone in the whole room too, because you can feel it when somebody else is engaged. So we think that Shakespeare wrote his plays to look at people in the eyes. And then it makes a big difference in your experience of them when you are talked to and not just talked, nearby. So we make sure that our actors talk to the audience.
Oh, that's really cool. Do you, in your free time, see Shakespeare plays, or do you just play them?
So I went to see a play this weekend called Green Day's American Idiot, and it was great. And it was like major set, major lights, major everything. It was terrific. I do go see Shakespeare when I am working because I want to see how other people are doing Shakespeare and if they have ideas that I can steal. But yeah, I do. And we have a master's program here at the American Shakespeare Center, and those students are always doing Shakespeare. So last night they did Two Noble Kinsmen. Last week they did a play called The Roaring Girl, which is not Shakespeare, but it's one of the guys who wrote at the same time as Shakespeare. So we always have plays going on here. And then Washington, D.C. is not far away, so I can go see plays in D.C. The week before last, I went to see a play in North Carolina called Shakespeare in Love. So it wasn't Shakespeare, but it was about Shakespeare. So yeah, and people tend to give me tickets and stuff because I have a job here. So
That's also really cool. Did you know that like knowing a lot about Shakespeare would entail like working at the company, or did you have to learn when you were at the company, or when did you?
That's a good question. So I taught high school theater in Texas, and I liked Shakespeare, and I did Shakespeare with my students because, you know, it's free. You can do Shakespeare without having to pay anybody for it. But I wanted to learn more, so I applied for a grant, and I got to go to Massachusetts. Hey, I know some people in Massachusetts. To Shakespeare and Company. Have you guys been to Shakespeare and Company?
I don't think so.
It's in Lenox, so it's a little bit away from you. But I studied there for a summer, and I met the guy who started the master's program here in Stanton, and I decided to apply for the master's program. So I came to Stanton and got my master's in Shakespeare, and I thought that I would go and become a college teacher, but then this job came open, so I got it, and I've been doing it since then. So I did need to know a lot more about Shakespeare than I knew in order to get the job, but my master's degree got me prepared.
Oh, nice. Yeah, one more question. Okay.
Sure. I know that like back then people would like really be part of it. They would stand, they would throw stuff. Do people still sometimes throw stuff at the stage, or no?
No, not so much. There's this one funny moment when Mercutio is about to fight Tybalt, and he reached out his hand to an audience member and like just was gesturing, and the audience member put Skittles in his hand, and he like looked at his hand and looked at his sword and knew that he had to do something. He couldn't eat them because he still had lines to say. So another actor came up and took the Skittles from him and ate them because he didn't have lines for a while. So that was a funny moment. But yeah, we do get some interaction with the audience. There was this time in Hamlet when Hamlet asked a question, and he like turned to a little boy in a student matinee who was sitting on the stage, and he said, "Should I kill him now?" And it's about his stepfather who's killed his dad. And the little boy said, "Absolutely, he has to die," right out loud. Everyone heard him. And then the guy playing Hamlet, Ben Kearns, realized that he had to like talk to that boy and convince that boy. It wasn't about talking to himself. It was like, oh no, this is actual persuasion that I have to do. But he used Shakespeare's lines to do it, and Shakespeare's lines worked for it. And so he was able to get off stage without killing the other actor, which is good.
All right. So you guys got to get back to the room.
Bye.
Bye guys, have fun.
Yep. Okay. See ya. Thank you. You guys are going
Bye.
to 7. You're going to number 7. Zone 7. Go to zone 7. Sarah, thank you so much.
Sure, Lexi, thank you. And I guess we're back on tomorrow?
Yeah, if that's all right with you.
Totally fine, yep.
I can't tell you how cool this was for them.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. It was fun to talk to them. I hope it goes well.
So thank you so much. And
So after this, we have a VR of the Royal Shakespeare Company Theater. And so when they go back in the room, they go to the VR headset. So it's really, really cool.
There's also a VR of a Hamlet production that was done actually by someone up in Boston. I think it's Commonwealth. I'll send you the link to that and some other portraits of Shakespeare so they can see other ways that artists have looked at Shakespeare.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Sure. Talk to you soon. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.